So, as we were doing before the breathing meditation, and as some people are new now, we won't start off with the nine round breathing meditation for ease of not having to explain that again. So let's begin by just watching your breathing. Just relax your body, relax your mind, and take as a object of mindfulness your respiration, recognizing the inhalation, the exhalation as that. Try to focus on that and let go of any other thoughts that are trying to ramble through your mind. Try to tighten your awareness to just watching, just observing the respiration. Let go of those other thoughts, your attention to the outer distractions and to the inner distracting emotional responses. Then bring your attention further inside to your mental consciousness. Leave your attention to the breathing and just watch the nature of the mind, the clear light nature of the mind within which the various thoughts and emotional states are arising. Don't focus on the content, but focus on the substratum of the mind itself, which is clear, unobstructing, which makes it possible for the thoughts to come and go. Let go of whatever appears to your mind again and again. Darkness, movement, light, whatever, all is arising, all are arising as clouds, cloud-like, illusion-like, within the spaciousness of your mind. So whatever arises, attachment, anger, pride, jealousy, confusion, or other thoughts, images, let go of your attention to them and place your attention instead on this spacious quality of the mind. Bringing your attention inside, let go of the constant attention to the presence of your body. Let that fade into the background and sense the consciousness within which it's arising, the perception of that body. Beyond our concepts and thoughts, our emotional responses, this nature of our mind is shared by all living beings. We could call it our conventional Buddha nature. Inspiring in that we can develop all the good qualities within it. There's nothing that cannot be developed through familiarity. There is nothing that cannot be eliminated, besides emotional responses even, and faulty states of mind. Even karmic instincts and imprints can be removed from this mind. In this time of incredible craziness in the world, aggression, fear, retaliation, political mind, recognizing our interdependence with all living beings, try to motivate for the participation in the class tonight, thinking, within this clear light nature of the mind, I'm going to listen, hear the teachings, contemplate, and try to familiarize, meditate on them in order to become less harmful to others, to overcome my needy mind, my harmful minds, eventually to develop good qualities to be able to benefit sentient beings, and then to totally pacify the ignorance in my mind, unknowing, to become enlightened for the welfare, for the aim of all living beings. I'm going to participate tonight in the class, familiarizing with the material that the great Buddhist saints have themselves meditated on in the past to achieve these goals. Thinking that these teachings, although written down by Lama Tsongkhapa based on Atisha's teachings, they trace back to Shakyamuni Buddha. These are Dharma teachings that we can actualize within our mind, develop the real Dharma jewel of true cessations and true paths. To do so, we need to rely initially on the external Sangha jewel, beings that are actualizing the paths can act as our examples of how to practice, how to take the medicine of the Dharma, and to take also refuge in the resultant Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha that we become, our mind transforms into. That's the real refuge, the resultant state, when we're actually free of these worries for ourselves and worries for the welfare of others. And then relax. Bring your attention back to the here and now, present. And I noticed Russ came in. Russ, right? Russell? Do you know most of the people, Russell? Yeah? Yeah, a lot of them. Well, okay. Well, at tea break, you can all give Russ a pat on the back. Say hello. So, we're studying the literature called the Stages of the Path, the Lam Rim in Tibetan. Do you know those words, Lam Rim? Victoria, do you know any Tibetan? Lam, what does Lam mean, do you know? Path. And Rim, then, stages. Sometimes in the past some lamas have translated the graduated path. It's not something that we say so much in English, is it? It's very much like the stages of the path to enlightenment, and this particular kind of presentation, although it didn't originate solely with Atisha. This particular kind of presentation that we'll be talking about some of the elements of his particular unique presentation of it. The great Indian saint Atisha talked about three kinds of individuals: the person of beginning, capability or scope, and intermediate scope and great scope. That particular way of laying out the stages of the path became very influential in Tibet, and Lama Tsongkhapa wrote several texts on this kind of development of the path, the stages of the path. And although the text that we have for this first part of the text is mainly based on his very elaborate Lam Rim Chenmo, the great exposition of the stages of the path, the syllabus that we'd been studying was mainly the intermediate Lam Rim, so it could be a little briefer. But Triden Rinpoche will be teaching, continuing on from the great Lam Rim, the Lam Rim Chenmo. So in our course, we've been studying for a couple of months on the beginning of the text through the teachings on the individual, and through the teachings on how to relate to a spiritual master, the meditation session, and so relying on the spiritual guide. Now we come to the section, if you were to look at the Lam Rim Chenmo anyway, and we'll just use that as a general guide, chapter 7 on page 117, A Life of Leisure and Opportunity. So the outline, as we've been, and it's sort of common to many of the Lam Rim texts, this kind of outline. It says here, the outline is B, or the second outline, the stages of how the students train their minds after they have relied on the teacher. So So part A was all of the meditations on relying on the spiritual guide, right? On the guru. So this is the second part. That's why I had said before, when we were studying it, that whole section on guru devotion, although when you meditate on it, it seems like a seamless continuity with the next meditations, sort of logically it comes first. That's how to rely on the guru, what we say, who is the root of the path, or which is the root of the path? What would it be better to say? We've mentioned this many times. What do you think, Mark? Guru is the root of the path, or how to rely on the guru, which is the root of the path? Oh, okay, come on. Diana, you must have an opinion on this. Okay. Oh, okay. So I think more it's talking about reliance on the guru is the root of the path. So that's how properly relying on a spiritual guide is kind of like the life energy, like the root of a plant that gives the possibility of spiritual growth. Without that, everything is kind of intellectual and artificial and just scholarly and so forth. So now, having relied on the guru, once understood it, having understood how to do that, now the stages of how the students train their minds. And this has essentially two parts, the first of which is this life of leisure and an opportunity. It says, an exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. And the second outline, which I think is probably chapter 8, let's see, how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So they're both part of B. First, let's say exhortation. What else would we say in English? Convincing, or instigating, or what's another word? The student to take advantage of this life of motivating, maybe. What is it? Yeah, the opportunity is there, but the word exhortation. So it's kind of like inciting us, the students, to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. That's the meditations that are sometimes called meditation on perfect human rebirth. So that's the purpose of it, to try to motivate us, to incite us, to become aware of the fact that we've got this situation that's very meaningful and rare and very, very hard to get again, and to take advantage of it. So we're going to be talking about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about chapter 8 also, and go over it again next time, because that makes a link with the next meditation on death and impermanence. How to take full advantage of the life of leisure and opportunity. So, in essence, if you talk about the Lam Rim and you've become familiar with it a little, the first meditation on guru devotion has a particular reason. It's set off by itself in a sense, and then once you've devoted oneself to a spiritual guide, then you how you train in the path has two parts. First, trying to motivate yourself or convince yourself, or exhorting yourself, inciting yourself, or the teacher inciting the student to take advantage of this life of leisure and endowment. And then what you do what do you do? Once you're really excited now. Oh, I've got this incredible opportunity. But then you have to know what to do with it. So that's all the other meditations, starting with death and impermanence, some of which are common to the individual of lower scope. That is the higher scope, medium scope, and common to the lower scope. Some of them are common to the intermediate scope and high scope, the meditations on cyclic existence in general. And then some of them are exclusive to the high scope, like the meditations on the Bodhisattva path and bodhicitta and so forth. So you might wonder about these meditations on perfect human rebirth or life of leisure and endowment. You might think, sort of like maybe it was an Indian invention or a Tibetan invention. The Buddha didn't really talk about it. But indeed, there are quotes in this chapter, and you can see from the Prajnaparamita sutras and other sutras, from Nagarjuna's writings and other places, that this is something that the Buddha himself talked about in the scriptures, the context is that, to try to awaken people, disciples, to the situation we have so that we can take advantage of it. This life of leisure and opportunity is divided up in that way, or sometimes it's called freedom and richness. So freedom or leisure mean the same thing here. Do you have any idea what is freedom from? Have you studied at all, Sarah? This kind of thing? So what would the freedoms, what would they be? What would you have freedom from or leisure from? Oh, I thought you say. Georgie, do you know?
I could take a stab at it.
With your purba? Okay. Okay.
Maybe it's freedom from suffering or the causes of suffering, such as karma and klesha, but maybe I'm wrong.
You may be wrong. What do you think? Is that what we have now, a life of leisure where we don't have any problem with karma and klesha?
Oh no, we definitely have that problem.
I think we do.
So it'd be freedom from the obstacles to practicing the Dharma, such as being born in the realm of like a barbarian, or being born without full mental capabilities, or without
There you go.
a time of the
That sounds
Buddha,
good.
or where the Buddha's teachings were given, and
Sounds
so
good.
on and so on.
So here, leisure or freedom means leisure or freedom from states of that are unfree, that are turbulent. And so the Buddha talked about 8 unfree states, or however you want to term them. So we have a life of leisure in which we're actually free from these states which are big obstacles to the practice of Dharma. Say, for instance, if we were to be born in, after this lifetime and previous lifetimes, born as a hell being, do you think it's easy to practice in the hell realm? What do you imagine? I mean, we talk about, in Christianity and some other religions, there's also talk of hell, but it's, from the Buddhist perspective, it's not eternal. It's a realm like any other realm, but it lasts a very, very long time in general, much longer than a human lifetime in general, unless there's some extraordinary circumstance that terminates that hell existence. When we talk about the suffering of the hell realms, we talk a little bit about the time it takes to exhaust that experience. In that experience, if you could imagine the least kind of suffering being, imagining something like this, a scenario in the hot hells, first of all, finding yourself on a really hot, a red hot ground, much hotter than the sand on, what's the hot beach? Santa Cruz Beach. You know how sometimes when you go to the beach and the sand is so hot you have to sort of tiptoe across, and you don't even like to put the soles of your feet on? Have you ever experienced that? Maybe we don't go to the beach so much now. Russ, have you ever experienced? You can imagine much hotter, red hot ground. So that itself is let's say, a distraction, to say the least. And one has a very sensitive body, and coming from the sky are weapons. This is said to be one of the least suffering of the hell experiences. Weapons coming down, hitting, imagine knives or axes or spears coming down, piercing one's body. And if you actually, when we talk about the suffering of the hell realms, we actually meditate on that, try to imagine what that suffering is like, because it's something that we have experienced numberless times before. There's a chance by meditating on that, you can actually get some certainty of that. You won't necessarily remember your past hell realms, but you can sometimes get a certain confidence that this does exist. Trying to avoid these, being hit, and becoming more and more, sound familiar? Sounds like working in the kitchen. What is it? Yeah, sounds like a second. Feeling more and more pain, even your blood when it falls to the ground, as though it has consciousness also, and feeling pain as it touches the hot ground. So this is the least kind of suffering. And in a situation like that, if right now there's just a little bit of pain, like a mosquito bite, or you know, some kind of small, like the example sometimes given, like an ember of the incense were to fall in your lap, you immediately can't do anything else till you get that off. You know, how could you possibly practice the Dharma while experiencing this kind of excruciating suffering of the hell realms? So that's one of that particular kind of state is said to be one that's unfree. It's not a state of leisure. You don't have the leisure to practice the Dharma because your mind is totally intent on trying to put up with suffering or to avoid the suffering or just coming to grips with it. The Dharma does not come to mind. It's almost impossible to practice Dharma while in the hell realms. There might be some examples. The Buddha, when the great bodhisattvas might be born there, they might be able to practice in some way, but not ordinary beings like ourselves. The other of the lower realms, what the Buddha called the lower rebirths, being born as a spirit. What do we call? Do you know the Sanskrit word? Preta? Preta. And what do you know the Tibetan word? Who's a scholar? A yidak. Almost sounds like a Yiddish word. A yidak. Yidak is the Tibetan way of translating that. Hungry ghost, or this kind of spirit realm, is one which is kind of the consequence of, you get the feeling that it's much more related with attachment in previous lives as its motivating cause, although other things can cause a rebirth as a hungry ghost, because one of the main features is this inability to find what you want and need, because of always having an acquisitive mind, a mind of attachment and lust and attachment in previous lives, for food, for affection, for companionship. The Preta life is not one you'd want to have. Maybe not as intensively suffering, physical suffering as the hell beings, but mental dissatisfaction, not finding what you want. So that's also considered a unfree state. Very difficult for pretas. Very, very few examples of spirits like that being able to practice the Dharma in the Buddhist scriptures. So what about the examples of today, the various kinds of spirits that channel? You think they're pretas? You know, they give advice. Who do they give advice to? Who's that movie star? You know, there's some movie stars who channel, and people who channel. Shirley MacLaine, and there's Seth. I don't know. Do you think they could be pretas? Maybe more likely if they have a clear mind and they don't seem to be suffering very much. Maybe they're kind of desire realm gods that have some ability to contact the human realm. Yeah.
Are Nagas, would Nagas fall in, what category of the 6 realms would Nagas fall into?
Who knows? Is they a 7th realm? Do we have to posit a 7th realm for the Nagas? You know what Nagas are? You might call them Naga spirits, but they're called Nagas. In India, did anyone been to India when they use the word Nag? What does Nag usually mean in? Snake. Or sometime in South India, where at the monastery where we lived, the local people, it meant, they usually just called cobras, Nag. This kind of drop off the final A in modern Hindi, although in Sanskrit it's Naga, but sometimes they say Nag. But so sometimes the Nagas can appear as snakes or serpents, but that's not their inviolable form. Nagas are actually members of the animal realm, 3rd of the lower realms, kind of like la crème de la crème. Is that right? La crème de la crème of the animal realm. Why? Because they do have more intelligence than other animals. They have incredible wealth. But unlike other animals that are overcome by the darkness of ignorance and sort of totally incapable of practicing anything sophisticated in Dharma, although you can certainly have lassie and whatever your dog or cat is, and what was your parrot's name? Parakeet's name? Dwayne or whatever, incredible, kind, and altruistic. It can't. You can't really teach them about the path because of the lack of clarity of their minds. Nagas have because of giving in previous lives, charity and generosity in previous lives, they have an experience of being very wealthy. So the Nagas actually have embedded in their head a jewel. So it doesn't necessarily mean a snake. So it is some kind of animal realm being that almost borders on what we might call a spirit, because it can take different shapes, can even appear as a human and so forth. They may manifest sometimes they may be invisible. They often live around water or trees, and one of the interactions with humans is to annoy them, push their buttons by leaving bad smells. Little boys, little girls, mainly boys, making pee-pee on the trees, or washing dirty things in a river where the Nagas inhabit and offending them, and then oftentimes they can cause different kind of illnesses for a long period of time that can't be cured by almost any kind of medicine, but can be cured quite easily with some spiritual kinds of practices and a mantra and meeting someone with the bodhicitta and so forth. So these are the three lower realms: the hell realm, the preta realm, the spirit, hungry ghost realm, and the animal realm. They're unfree in that one is mainly overcome by suffering, dissatisfaction, and just unclarity of mind, and so it's almost impossible to practice the Dharma in those realms. It's not free. You don't have the freedom to practice. Similar to them, but on the other side of the spectrum, are certain kind of what is mentioned, long life gods. So there's much discussion, if you were to debate about this, what's meant by, why are the long life gods, who constitutes long life gods? But in general, we can do a general understanding like this. When you're really on a roll, anyone on a roll right now? Russ, are you on a roll? Sorry. When things are going well and almost anything you wish for starts to take place. It happens sometimes in our lives, maybe not often, maybe in some people's lives more than others because of karma. Sometimes if you're not trained in the Dharma, that itself can become a distraction. There's no thought of renunciation because one's wishes are being fulfilled very easily. So in some ways, in Geshe Zopa's commentary to this section of the Lam Rim Chenmo, he mainly talks about, he gives the different examples of long life gods, meaning mainly all of the gods, the devas of the desire realm, where those states are very much unfree because the mind is distracted out of various prizes, various marvels of cyclic existence and pleasure. Do we have something analogous in the world today? Who are these long life gods of the human realm? There's a good example. The Rockefellers or the Bushes. Oh, excuse me. And people who, who? The Heinzes also. Yeah. Okay. We have to have balance, fair and balanced. This class is is going to be known as fair and balanced. Excuse me. It's a little joke for those of you who are watching this videotape maybe 10 years from now. Look up on the internet Fox News. Fair and balanced. What is it? Hollywood. Hollywood experience, kind of like long life gods. That's a very good example. It is possible, and there are individuals who have an instinct from previous lifetimes when that great fame and celebrity comes, they can still remember what's really important, but it can become a very inebriating kind of experience. So that also is said to be an unfree state. So we talk about sort of states within cyclic existence. The human realm is at this very excellent juncture between unclarity and suffering, the three lower realms above that, but not totally inebriated with pleasure. And this allows us this kind of leisure as a human being. There are some fine distinctions when you talk about the long life gods. Sometimes it's mentioned, it refers to the gods of that lack discrimination. There's a certain kind of realm that you can be born in due to cultivating a particular kind of concentration. And the fourth concentration, remember when we talked about the form realm? The fourth concentration, at that point you can develop a cessational absorption, and in the formless realm, in the fourth formless realm, you can develop another kind of absorption. These are sometimes referred to when you talk about fine detail. If you talk about the Abhidharma with the scholars, they'll say this is what's being referred to, because in those states, an individual's whole lifetime can be spent totally oblivious of practice of Dharma, just concentrating on either a state of no discrimination, not having, not totally without discrimination, it's said, but without gross discrimination. So the mind it's almost like a thoughtless state for eons. During that period of time, you might think, well, that might be kind of nice. No hassles, right? No one to bother you. But in that time, your virtuous karma is being depleted, and no virtue is being created to take its place. So usually at the end of those long life experiences, long life gods, they're born in the lower realms afterwards. Okay, so those are four states that are without leisure. Then also, once born as a human, that's not enough. One might be born, for instance, as what we might call a barbarian, although that kind of brings to mind Arnold Schwarzenegger somehow. Wasn't he in one of those movies? Conan the Barbarian? Okay. So he seemed to be quite sophisticated, and he was a good guy in that, and he used to help people. So, but here by barbarian, we mean in a border region where individuals don't have any kind of spiritual ethics. That is, they might have their own ethical system. You have to pay, allegiance to the leader or something like that. But we won't get into this. This is fair and balanced, so we won't get into that. It could cause too much disruption. Say being in a situation where one would easily be led by one's culture into creating negative actions, feeling it's right, taking advantage of others, killing, stealing, destroying, and so forth. What we might call, from supposedly cultural point of view, barbarian cultures, although as Dorji points out, maybe we ourselves today, maybe you could call many of our modern countries, cultures, barbarian. Here, when we talk about barbarian, a barbarian or someone not in a central land, so someone sort of on the outskirts of civilization, away from the mitigating factors of that. The opposite of that, although we're not talking about that yet, the opposite of that would be to be born in the center of spiritual civilization. So the time of the Buddha, that would have meant Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha attained enlightenment, and the areas radiating out from that, where the Dharma was still very prevalent, and there were the various kinds of, the ability to become one of the four kinds of spiritual ordinations. Take one of the four kinds of ordinations of a fully ordained monk or fully ordained nun, or novice monk or novice nun. So that's also sort of to be born as a barbarian. You can almost see that today. There's so many people born in situations, well, even in a sense, being born in a neighborhood. Even if your country, you might say, oh, this is a spiritual country, America's a spiritual country or something. We are in America, in case you're watching this. But if you're born in an area where there's what do you call it, the slum or gang robbery, the barrio, the ghetto, or whatever, where the culture is one, what's around you is very difficult to ignore. So that's, in a sense, that's kind of the sense of on a small scale of what might be meant here on a larger scale to be born as a barbarian. In some lifetimes, being born as a human is not enough. In many lifetimes in the past, even when the Buddha was in the world, we were barbarians and we didn't come in contact with his teachings, and we were led into other kinds of activity that was useless. Being born as a barbarian. So the first four were like these states other than the human state. Then being born as a human, being born as a barbarian is an unfree state. Being born when even not a barbarian, being born close to the Buddha but not having your faculties. Mainly here it talks about the most sensitive one, of course, is your mind, clarity of mind, being deranged because of the karma you've created in past lives. Not being able to hear the teachings or make use of them. Or having other faculties not intact. You're being blind or deaf or mute so that you can't really hear or see or participate in the teachings and really get to the depth of them. Even the Buddha's there. It's almost like being oblivious of it. There's always great examples. I think with Lama Uso we read, is it Helen Keller? Was she the one that was born deaf and blind and mute for a long time? Maybe she was able to make sound later, or maybe not, I'm not sure. But a very inspiring story, but that's a very exceptional person. Usually someone who would be born both blind and mute would, very difficult for them to come in contact and to practice the spiritual path. So besides being born as a barbarian, even if we weren't born as that, being born in a situation when our mind was totally unclear, deranged, insane, whatever, overcome by mental, problems like that. Even that's not the situation. Sort of being a sophisticate, maybe intellectual, and but overcome with our own opinionatedness, what we call wrong view, holding wrong views. You know what wrong views are in this context? That has nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats or whether you served in Vietnam or anything. Here, wrong view has to do with, say, for instance, not believing in past and future lives, not believing that there's any karmic consequence from our unethical actions. There are many individuals like that, and who, from many points of view, are very cultured and are very good people, but they don't really have the leisure to practice the Dharma because of these strong views that they hold. I think opinions kind of gives a flavor of it too. When we say someone's very opinionated, what does that kind of conjure up to you? They already know anything, and you're not going to convince them very, very easily. Pardon? Egotistical. So this is one of the other unfree states. Being born as a barbarian in a border region, being born with not full faculties, especially your mind, being deaf and dumb and so forth, even having wrong views. Even you're very smart, you're not a barbarian, you've got all your faculties, but that's very much the situation today, especially people that, because of their karma, are very much influenced by their education, by our culture of consumption and propaganda, and consume, and the meaning of life is to become rich and to achieve the American dream. I always wonder what people think about the American dream. It always seems a bit sad to me. It seems like a bit of a nightmare. But the fourth unfree state, being born as a human, even you don't have these problems. You're not a barbarian. You're born in a central place. You're intact, mind, body, faculties, arms, everything. You're fine physically and mentally. You're not totally opinionated. You're open-minded, but the Buddha has not arrived in the world. The Buddha is not. One does not have the pleasure of Buddha's presence in the world, we could say.
Is that the eighth?
This would be the eighth one, yeah. There's 4 states, so the 3 lower realms, long life God, and then even born as a human, being a barbarian, not complete senses, faculties, having very strong wrong views, and not being pleased by Buddha's descent. So this word, not being pleased by Buddha's descent, has a couple different meanings. In one sense, maybe it means Buddha has come, but you're not pleased. You're annoyed. Like the people that were angry when Christ came, from the historical text. But the main meaning is not, what do we usually mean? Sort of, it's kind of another meaning of that word, to be pleased. Not being pleased by Buddha's descent would mean not having the honor, not having the pleasure. We have the pleasure of Dorje's arrival. Not being pleased with Dorje's presence would mean not having Dorje around. Okay, that's kind of the meaning here, but it does have the other implication too in some of the texts when we talk about this. So it's something you might want to investigate as you read other texts. So these are called the unfree states, states of lacking leisure, because in those states one doesn't really have the ability to, although you're alive, you're born in a realm for a certain period of time, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to practice the Dharma, if at all. On the other hand, not only are we, I try to make it a little more invigorating, class. I hope that's just a lack of caffeine in Midians. You don't drink. That's the reason. Okay, good. That's a problem. Besides that, besides being, we are free of these. Well, are we? Are we born in hell? We're not born in hell, although you might think your life is hell. We're not born as hungry ghosts, although you might feel unloved and can't find what you want, can't get no satisfaction. It's not the same as being born as a hungry ghost. We may feel dumb as an animal sometime, but we don't have, or maybe completely controlled by others, but we're not like the animal rebirth. And we don't have, even when we're on a roll, even the movie stars are not totally intoxicated with that pleasure, or they might fall under it, but we ourselves are not, we don't have those unfree states. How about barbarians? Are we barbarians? No, in a sense, we're born, we have the fortune to be born, let's say, being here, Land of Medicine Buddha, congregating here. In a sense, this is kind of like a mini central land, and basking in the glow of our teachers, the great lamas that are coming now, and so forth. This is kind of like that. So we're free of that. We're free of, all of you are, if even if some of our faculties are not top notch, or maybe my eyes, I need glasses, and I'm not totally deaf. And so one other meaning of this also, when we talk about the not having complete faculties, is that if one were to have incomplete faculties, you couldn't, in the time of the Buddha, you couldn't take ordination. You had to have all of your faculties intact. If you were blind or lame or something, you couldn't take ordination. So we don't have that situation. Also, we're not, although we might be a bit opinionated sometime, no, I'm not looking in any particular direction, we are, what's the word again? Fair and, what was the word? Even-minded, fair and balanced, yeah, okay. There's a little joke. I think that's the slogan of Fox News, isn't it? Or the O'Reilly show, I'm not sure, fair and balanced. And also, although the Buddha is not the historical Buddha, the universal teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, is not physically present, manifesting in the world now, there is a similitude of that in that the great beings, the Dalai Lama and other great beings are an example of that. So even in the time, it says in the text sometimes, even in the time of Nagarjuna, not all of even Nagarjuna would, in a sense, not have all of those states of leisure, but something similar to them, okay? So on the other side, we also have a richness or endowment or opportunities to practice that can make this lifetime very, very valuable. So on one hand, we've got the leisure. We're not overcome with an incredibly adverse conditions. On the other hand, we have all of the conducive conditions to practice the Dharma. And you might think, well, excuse me, George, I have not yet inherited my aunt's, my aunt's going to give me $20,000, $100,000 or something. I haven't inherited that. I don't have the conducive conditions. I don't have a condominium. I don't have my car. How can you say I have all the conducive conditions? You don't need that to achieve enlightenment or to achieve liberation or to make spiritual realizations. Sometimes you might think you need that. Oh, nobody loves me. We might think we need that. We're looking for that. But Milarepa didn't have any, entangling relationships. Lama Tsongkhapa, Buddha, so forth. A lot of things that we might think that we need. I remember once, I mentioned this before, once talking to my teacher, Lama Sopa Rinpoche, and saying something about needing some money to do retreat or to travel or something, and Rinpoche said, "Oh, don't worry, just put down on a piece of paper, just send me a note how much money you need to achieve enlightenment, and I'll supply it." Oops. How much money do you need to achieve enlightenment? You might think, you need your retreat house, you need your, your car, your cell phone. Pardon? What the figure was? Yeah. It was quite big. My figure. Okay. So of these opportunities, of these conducive conditions, so the 8 unfree states that we have leisure from, the 8 leisures, it means that we're free of, what's the word, adverse conditions that can prevent us from practicing. Now we have these special 10 endowments or 10 opportunities or conducive conditions. So they are being born as a human. There's 5 of them from our side that we have. 5 of them exist in the outer world, in the continuum of others. So being born as a human. Who can go through the list with me? Have you? Okay. Being born as a human, first of all, in a central land. So central land was what we talked about before. In a small sense, being born or being present now, it doesn't have to be born, being present in a place where the Dharma is thriving, being born as a human in a central land, with all of our faculties, so that in this context that would mean having the ability not only to listen to the teachings, but even to take ordination if we wanted to. And so this in the text it quotes some of the sutras saying not having irreversible karma. Irreversible karma, or having reversible karma, meaning all the things, even we've done pretty bad things. Any of you done pretty bad things? All of that karma can be purified quite easily. If we had engaged in the 5 actions of immediate retribution, much more difficult to purify, although it is possible to purify. What are the actions of immediate retribution? I think Frank's studied this before, because I remember one of the courses you pointed out some.
Let's see, killing your mother or father.
Killing your mother, father, or your mother?
Killing one of your parents.
Killing your mother, killing your father. So nowadays, the gender uncertainty, I'm not sure what you say.
Killing an arhat.
So that's 2, mother and father, 2 separate ones. Killing an arhat, someone who's achieved liberation. Doesn't mean a Buddha or Bodhisattva.
Drawing blood from a Buddha. From the
Tathagata with evil intention, not shaving him and oh my gosh,
and causing a rift in the sangha.
Causing schism, rift in the sangha, right? So those are, and then there are 5 that are similar to that. So those are, if we were to have created such heavy actions as that, Who are those boys down in Los Angeles? They killed their mom and dad, or they killed their dad? The Menendez. Did they kill their mother and father, or just their? So, Menendez. So, pray for them. Then, so being born as a human in a central land, with faculties intact, not having created the actions of immediate retribution, not having heavy, irreversible karma, and having faith in, here it says the source, when they explain it, means the scriptures the Buddha gave, the Tripitaka, the teachings on, sort of in a sense, that there is some guidance on discipline, how to attain concentration and wisdom, having some kind of confidence or faith that there is something that one can practice. Without that, one doesn't really have the conducive condition. You might be very skeptical. You might have opinions that these things don't lead to any result. Then, in the continuum of others, those 5 of the 10 endowments or opportunities are things that are ripening particularly on you. To be present while these other 5 are existing in the continuum of others in the world, this also constitutes your part of your life of leisure and endowment, leisure and opportunity, and that is to be born when the Buddha has descended. So the Buddha is not existing in the world now, but there are representatives of the Buddha that into a clear mind can be seen as that, like the Dalai Lama and other great beings like that. Not only do the Buddhas appeared in the world, but they turn the wheel of Dharma. So many times there are enlightened beings, but they don't, because of the karma of individuals, they don't turn the wheel of Dharma. It's kind of like to be in the presence of some great being and not having the ability to hear their teachings. Maybe sometimes if we don't have the translators, sometimes we're a little bit like that. All you could do is sit and look at someone and, to be in their presence, to sit in darshan. So this goes beyond that, to have the opportunity of actually, the Dharma actually having been taught, the wheel of the Dharma has been turned, and that it is not yet degenerated, thirdly. So when the Buddhas turn the wheel of Dharma, when they teach, it always has a certain, it's not surprising, it doesn't last forever. It's not surprising that it will degenerate over time because it depends on the karma of living beings. So we still live, although this is a degenerate age, and it's the Dharma realizations that were cultivated in the past are more difficult to generate now. We are not totally in a situation where the Dharma has degenerated. So what does it say? The Buddha descended, turned the wheel of Dharma, the teachings did not degenerate, and we have there is a community of spiritual aspirants that we can join. Really, in this particular presentation that the Buddha taught, it meant that the Sangha exists, that we can become a member of that. We might have the interest from our side, but unless the Sangha exists and has the capability of carrying on the ordination, there's no way that we can become. So to think how wonderful that is, that exists in the world, there's opportunity is there. And lastly, there are compassionate, kind individuals who are kind of patrons, benefactors of the Dharma that, you yourself didn't do all of this. All of you have helped to make the center exist, all of the centers exist, but there are individuals who have benefacted their funds, their time, their life energy to make these things possible for others, that make various funds and cabins at Vajrapani where people can do retreat and so forth. So all of these conditions in total allow one to actually practice the Dharma in some very meaningful, intense way. Okay, so I think we should take a short break now. Midian's going to have a little, either hot water or maybe some cold water, and we'll continue after a while. Okay, so Don has a question.
It's kind of a question we were discussing as a group. Are all spirits Fredas?
So what do you think? What was your conclusion? Who was your group?
The conclusion was to ask you.
I don't know. Well, it depends on what you mean by spirit. You vote yes? All spirits are... So, for instance, sometimes people talk about Naga spirits because Nagas are not necessarily always manifesting in an embodied form. They can afflict you at distance. So, in a sense, you might call them spirits, but they're not part of the Preta realm. Okay? Whatever. And, like, for instance, when people nowadays talk about channeling, there might be some kind of what people think are spirits that affect them in a beneficial way and give them some advice. It might not always be dharmic, might be kind of dharmic, but can't really lead them out of samsara. They might be desire realm gods. Certain gods like that can heal, that maybe even practicing the lower tantras. One of our teachers, is it Gelik Rinpoche in Michigan? When he came to Malaysia once, there was one healer in Kuala Lumpur who supposedly he said he had a vision of Chenrezig, Avalokiteshvara, and he would ask Chenrezig to heal and they would help. And this seemed very unlikely because the fellow had been just a book publisher, hadn't led a particularly spiritual life. It seemed unlikely that someone could kind of have a direct communication with Avalokiteshvara like that. And Gelik Rinpoche had said, from his opinion, he was visiting at the time, he thought it might be a situation that sometimes the desire realm gods, they might be practicing the lower tantras and they have divine pride of being Avalokiteshvara or Tara or whatever. And so with good intention, they can benefit a lot, but a person to channel them, so to speak, or to have communication with them doesn't have to have so exalted pure karma. They have to have some particular good karma with respect to them and so forth. So those might be called spirits too, and they're not necessarily pretas. So it depends on what you mean. I think if you are afflicted by something, it might be a naga, but if it's something that's kind of has a kind of bad effect on your mind or whatever, might be a preta, because oftentimes if when what was it, not Rosemary's Baby, was it The Exorcist or something? You know, that when you talk about very heavy kinds of what's the word they use in the West? Possession. Much of that might be pretas. But there's many that don't have any contact with us at all. That just, they're completely, their karma, pretas. Well, mainly when I'm saying spirits, I'm mainly meaning pretas, but it can be, in some cases, others. Some of them don't have any contact with humans at all. They're just sort of wandering around and looking for food and so forth. Victoria, you had a question?
Yeah. What, the smoke eaters and the yakshas, are they also pretas?
The smell eaters. The what do you call them? You know what they're called? You know, the Gandharvas, Disa, we say. So sometimes that there's actually some kind of beings that might be in the retinue of the yakshas on Mount Meru that are called smell eaters, that have certain qualities. Sometimes that's a name that's given to beings in the bardo state. So there are different meanings you have to know from the context. Just like when they talk about non-duality, it has many different meanings in different contexts. So smell eaters or Gandharvas, when we talk about the city of Gandharvas, we asked Kirti Senchab Rinpoche and never got one-pointed, never got sort of like one-pointed satisfaction that we knew what he was saying, whether Gandharvas, the cities of Gandharvas were something that did have an appearance that were being constructed, or they were just kind of optical illusions or whatever. But they may not be spirits. They may be actually, yakshas and so forth, they would be like desire realm gods. They would be in the entourage above the desire realm on the four continents on Mount Meru, according to the cosmology of Buddhism. The answer didn't. She didn't ask. She said, "What about yaksha? What about yakshas and smell eaters?" And so the question didn't really. It was only Bill O'Reilly would be able to say no to that question. It said, "What about?"
Early, his original question. So
Whose question?
or Don's.
Yeah, Don's original question. No, so it depends on what you know how you understand. If you really are thinking just those kind of malicious spirits or those that are hungry and lonesome and they can't find what they want, then that means pretas, yeah, those spirits. But there are other kinds of things that we might label spirits, like even nagas we might call spirits, or desire realm gods in certain circumstances. They are mentally affecting us and influencing us, and we might call those gods. I might call those spirits.
Pressure, if you're in Tibet in certain remote areas and you feel like a pressure, it might be a spirit presence. Is that the type of, would that be a preta too?
That kind of pressure doesn't occur only in Tibet. But an example I might have given before is being in Nepal, near Lama Zopa Rinpoche's cave in Laudo, it's near Mount Everest and Solukhumbu. And many of us, there's some spirits that quite in those kind of environments, being away from the distractions of everyday life, sometimes one is more aware of spirits, their influence and so forth. In other circumstances, when there's so many other distractions, you may not be aware of it so much. So you might, when you're sleeping at night, there might be a pressure pushing on you, and if you try to struggle with that, it exacerbates, gets worse, and stays and so forth. And one of the ways to overcome that is to feel compassion for those beings and to meditate on insubstantiality of yourself and egolessness. So especially in Tantra, where both factors, compassion, motivation of bodhicitta, and arising out of the wisdom of emptiness, are present, that's like a very powerful way to, whenever you're afflicted by outside influences, both to meditate on emptiness and to generate good heart, compassion, and especially compassion for beings that might be afflicting you.
Ghosts that are not pretas per se.
Ghosts that are not so yeah. Sometimes in China, especially where there's a belief in one's ancestors coming back. Well, we believe also in the West too, but you have seances and Uncle Charlie comes back, or and you ask them questions, or they appear in your house and so forth. There might be some Buddhists who have theories that it's possible for a person to come back, but in general, the Buddha taught that once you die, and you've left this body, and you enter into the intermediate state, there is no memory. Even you look down and see your body of the past, if you have actually died, you don't think that's me. You think, oh, look at that body. If you have any thoughts, and then you're moving away quite rapidly. So in the text on purification called Jangwa for the dead, the deceased, that we translated a couple of years ago, in the notes, there's some explanation that many times we have along with us certain kinds of spirits. There might be pretas, there might be desire realm gods, depends, that associate with us for our whole life. They're very long, they're much longer lived than us, longer lived than us. And when we die, because they know everything about us, if they're mischievous, they might come back and try to confuse others by imposturing us. And so some in the Jangwa ceremony, at one of the points we offer torma and say, hey, listen, all of you spirits who are coming and confusing the relatives and friends, take this torma, this offering, and stop that. Leave them alone. Go away, because it's causing problems. So in general, I'd say the mainstream Buddhist understanding is that what we call ghosts are spirits of a kind but they are not they are not the let's say the embodiment or the the illusory kind of mystical presence of the person we think they are. They may take that appearance out of playing, either being mischievous or maybe kind of
A clairvoyant thing too, where you're seeing something about something that happened in the past and thinking it's something that's occurring now, or that maybe people are mistaken
deja
that.
vu all over again. It is possible that you can be born in the same place. Certainly, there are many stories of that, out of attachment or whatever. You can be born, or out of other things because you've created some karmic link with that place. But you will not necessarily remember that that's your place, or that you were so-and-so in the previous life.
People that see ghosts, in fact, they might be having some sort of minor clairvoyant experience and not really seeing their
Oh,
grandmother
certainly. If they see
turning
ghosts, they must have some kind of karma to see them. So not everyone sees ghosts. That's why people would say, and sometimes it just might be an hallucination. Of course, you're afraid, like the boogeyman. To see the branches going and you get scared. Sometimes those kind of outer circumstances can cause fear to rise in your mind, and then spirits that are present can take advantage of that. Or sometimes they can kind of inculcate some kind of situation that can cause you to be fearful. And then when your mind is not under control, they can affect you more. Let's leave that. Let's leave that avenue. Let me just continue. Okay, no, man, I can't. He didn't have caffeine. He didn't have sugar. He needs a question. Okay.
Now you won't answer the
I had my
question.
hand up for a long time.
Okay. I'm sorry.
So it's good that he brought that up, because that was partly what I was going to ask about this thing with the tormas you're offering to these hungry people. Okay, leave us alone. You're causing this problem. So I'm wondering, is that when we're saying that they're causing the problem, is that just a manner of speaking? Because I thought really what we believe is that I'm creating some condition and someone else is feeding off that. It's not that the ghost is causing the problem, but they're feeding off a condition I've created. So is that just casual language when you say go away, stop causing this problem?
I think it has a explicit meaning that unless those spirits that knew all the details about you, like say for instance, if there really is a seance where you might, not just like a Hollywood or whatever, kind of jokey one, that you think there's the presence of someone in the past and they're giving on the Ouija board, or they're giving answers. They might actually give some answers. They tell you something that happened, but it's not because it was that person. It's not like your Uncle Charlie or Uncle Vikram or whatever. It's a spirit that was associated with them and that is present now, pretending to be them.
I wasn't talking about that.
Okay, what are you talking about?
That's
why it's taking a long time. That's why I'm not. How are you talking about?
I was talking about that when we're offering the tormas to the hungry ghosts that are
Right.
quote unquote causing the problem.
Right.
Is that just a casual way of speaking? And
No,
I'm not just creating-
without them, there wouldn't, even you had the idea that your relatives are around, there wouldn't be anyone giving you any information. So they can cause confusion and make that problem bigger in people's minds, even if they're longing to, where's my loved one and so forth, where's my wife? If this,
I guess,
sick or ill, that's why you
so
say.
he's talking
Like-
about causing problems.
Yes.
This is the
I mean,
kind of problems that I'm talking about. The spirit, the ghosts, that what we call ghosts, coming back and pretending to be, the spirits pretending to be that person's ghost. So from the Buddhist perspective, when you were asking one of you were asking whether ghosts were spirits. So from a Buddhist perspective, what we in the world call ghosts are probably spirits, but not the spirit of the individual.
particularly what I'm talking about is that problem is being caused like an illness, in the case of an illness. That
Okay, that's
Isn't
could be,
it just-
that
isn't
could
it
be
just-
completely different. Then that doesn't necessarily have to do with a dead person's ghost, right? So
I'm just saying simply, isn't it that I'm causing the illness? And
Yeah, you're a
so why are we
cooperative
using the
condition.
language that they are?
So if you talk about, no, this is talking about something different, Midian. Like say, for instance, if you're talking about being afflicted by a spirit that may be, you're uncertain whether an illness that you have is being, one of the causes of it is a spirit, or whether partially your mind. Of course, that's true. What you're saying is absolutely right. But here we're talking about something else, what we call ghosts that come back and seem to be a particular person. That was the context of that question. So your question, we're not making offering in this. So this one, we're in that ceremony, we're not offering tormas to those spirits. But there are ceremonies too. If a person is afflicted, if a person who has clairvoyance can tell that there is a spirit influence, there are different kinds of rituals to do to cause them to first entice them to leave, using peaceful methods, and then to use your influence and to threaten them, and then to use wrathful means if those things fail.
Like I read particularly in Lama Zopa's book that with Nagas offering them torma cake, so on and so forth, because they're causing illness, asking them not to cause that. So I'm just wondering that why are we using that language if they're causing illness, if the Buddhist perspective is that I'm creating the whole
Certainly your
situation.
karma.
I was just wondering if that's just
Because,
kind of
say for instance, you have an infection that's eating up your body and causing you to get weak, and maybe the doctors, if you don't treat that infection, you'll die. And you'll say, well, I'm a Buddhist. I don't believe that there's any outside influence. It's all my karma. Well, of course, it's both. The fact that the infection exists on your body as a result of karma, but that you can provide some outside conditions, medications and so forth, to cause that condition to go away. And then the karma, you haven't purified the karma for you to experience fever and other things completely by doing so. You might think, oh, now I'm free of fever. You still have the karma to experience that when other conditions come, but you can prevent the cooperative condition for the ripening of karma if it's not fully ripened. Sometimes when it fully ripens, you can't stop it. But it's very sensible not to fall into like an extreme kind of religiosity where you think there's no need for outer medication or surgical procedures and so forth. Sometimes those kinds of conditions can eliminate the cooperative conditions that your karma is dependent upon, the ripening of your karma. Okay, good. Sure. Okay. Okay, but I'm going to now Mediancy, he had his hand up a long time, and if we don't get back to the text, okay, so we'll at the end you can ask me your question. Okay, I'll try to answer you. Okay, so we talked about leisure and endowment. I remember Geshe Tekcho trying to teach us tenets in Manjushri Institute in the 15 years ago or something, and the people in the class would ask so many questions. Geshe would just say, we've got to go through this material. I said, and then he would try to be kind of clever, try to praise us, and he said, at Sarah Monastery, I've never heard anyone ask these kinds of questions. It was kind of to some people they were proud to say, well, we ask better questions than the monks at Sarah. To others of us, we knew that they just going into minutia that we didn't get a chance to actually finish the subject that we're doing. Okay, so just as a general outline about this meditation. This meditation that's meant to exhort or incite the mind to take advantage of the perfect human rebirth has three parts, basically. One is recognizing this life of leisure endowment. If you don't know you have it, you can't go any further, Say, for instance, an analogy that's used in some of the Lam Rim texts. Say you have a jewel, you're a beggar, and you're going through the garbage and you find a jewel, but you don't recognize it as a jewel, or you have a jewel-encrusted vase, precious vase, golden vase that you found in the trash or in a underground somewhere, and you just use it to carry your water to wash your backside with, when you go to the toilet, or you use it to put the mop in. People would think, you have this you don't recognize what you have. You have this incredibly valuable thing, so precious, and you're using it for such a mundane purpose. Nagarjuna used an analogy like that, like the perfect human rebirth. Not recognizing it, we can waste it the same way that a person might use a precious vase to collect excrement and vomit. And what he was talking about is that how we might, up till now in our lives and other people, certainly use this incredible life of leisure and endowment simply to satisfy the senses, to become powerful and, berate others and to, enhance their ego, to have pleasure of the senses, to become powerful, rich, and so forth, which is not from from the American dream point of view or whatever, from the worldly point of view, might be completely legitimate ways of using this lifetime, but from a spiritual point of view are like not recognizing what we have, because the recognition has to do with leisure and opportunity, that recognizing that we are free of discordant conditions, adverse conditions to practicing the Dharma, and that we have all of the opportunities to practice. There's nothing that we're missing. We don't need a girlfriend or boyfriend. We don't need a new car. We don't need a condominium. We don't need more money. What happened? Some spirit over there?
Yeah, definitely.
That was definitely a spirit, okay. They're coming to try to show us. So one of the parts of this meditation is recognizing. So that's why you need to know these 8 freedoms, 8 leisures, and 10 opportunities or endowments or richnesses. You should know them like Don did, just like that, Then, secondly, you have to know how they're beneficial, why this life of leisure and endowment is beneficial, what the benefit of it is, the purpose or the value of it. And so there are different kinds of purposes that we can put this life. If we have the karma that we've created in the past, either through the practice of Tantra or by culminating the Bodhisattva path, we can use a perfect human rebirth like this to achieve enlightenment. Or if we have the karma on a lesser scale, to achieve nirvana. Those are called the definite goodness, the states of definite goodness, liberation and enlightenment. Or on a lesser scale, we could use this lifetime to create the karma to be born in high status as a human in future lifetimes, to again create the karma to have a life of leisure and endowment where we can continue to practice the path. Because realistically speaking, it's not many people who achieve enlightenment in one lifetime just like that. It's something that's cumulative over perhaps many lifetimes, or maybe a few lifetimes at least. In order to have that continuity of practice, we need to have assurance after this lifetime that we will have another situation of leisure and endowment where we can practice the Dharma. Because, for instance, after this lifetime, if we're born in the lower realms, we're born as an animal, a hell being, as a spirit, as a preta rather, very difficult to create virtue, very likely to create the cause in that lifetime to be again born in the lower realms, cycling in the lower realms for a long, long period of time. So what we can do with this life of leisure and endowment, let's say we could achieve enlightenment and liberation, we can actually, besides creating the causes for future rebirths, intermingled in between those two is to make realizations this lifetime, or to leave the foundation of developing bodhicitta, even if we don't develop it completely. To develop compassion, to spend a lot of time familiarizing the mind again and again with equalizing ourselves with others, recognizing others as dear. Leaving the imprints in our minds that in future lifetimes these seeds then can be enhanced, provided that we have another human rebirth of leisure and endowment. Also to recognize, to leave a imprint of understanding emptiness to whatever degree we can. If we have the fortune and intellect this lifetime and the right conditions to meet teachings about emptiness, explicit enough that we can, and detailed enough that we can follow that, incredible karma, even to encounter such teachings, or the teachings on the Bodhisattva path, on compassion and bodhicitta, to actually study them and leave imprints in the mind so that as one is born again, even one doesn't make a lot of progress this lifetime, one can make enormous progress in the future lifetimes, because on the basis that one is laying now. So many times, Kirti Sanchab Rinpoche mentioned recently when talking about Tantra, even though Tantra is a very high subject, he said that the great yogis and yoginis of Tibet and India said that it was very skillful to leave imprints, many kinds of virtuous roots in our mind, so that in future lifetimes, if we can keep a continuity of human rebirths, that we can, how to say, pursue this path in its entirety in some lifetime, perhaps achieve enlightenment in one lifetime, by having roots of virtue of all of the different stages of the path. So these are things that we can do with this perfect human rebirth. Lama Zopa Rinpoche and some of the Lam Rims likes to emphasize that this perfect human rebirth is incredibly beneficial even in the shortest instant, because through the practice of either bodhicitta or guru devotion, these two very, very powerful meditative techniques and practices, in one instant, even in a thought instant, we can create more virtuous karma than even arhats can create in their entire lifetime. You might think, well, arhats, they realize emptiness, they have pure renunciation. Boy, in their lifetime, they're going to create a lot of merit, you know. But with bodhicitta, if you really had a pure thought of bodhicitta, in one instant, one thought instant, you could create more merit than they with such a life as this, with a life of leisure and endowment. Also through the practice of guru devotion, trying to see one's teacher's actions as pure, as a vehicle for the expression of the omniscient mind, dissemination within the world, you know. This also is said to be very, very powerful, both for accumulating merit and for purifying negative karma. So when you look at it that way, this perfect human rebirth, incredibly valuable, much more valuable than anything else. Lama Zopa Rinpoche spent many, many years teaching us about this life of leisure and endowment again and again. I remember the meditation courses at Kopan. After some years, he would say, you know, some of the older students are expecting higher teachings, but until you realize these, you know, perfect human rebirth, death and impermanence, suffering and so forth, there's no real purpose in, you know, teaching, you know, oh, now we've done that, now we're going to go to do this. These are things that have to be actualized and realized. So Rinpoche, through his own manifestation, showed much effort in studying it and learning about it in many ways. Like, for instance, one way to think. In the world today, say, for instance, if you don't have a lot of money, you don't realize you have money, and you get shortchanged sometimes, it's very easy to get preoccupied by that. You know, the cab driver rips you off, or in India, the rickshaw driver, or whatever, or, you know, whatever. Life gives you some problem, and you can very easily get angry and preoccupied and, what's the word, distracted from practice of Dharma. But say, for instance, you were to know that you had in the bank, oh, I've got $100,000 in the bank, I've got $10,000 in the bank. $5? Nothing. This cab driver just ripped me off for $5? Nothing. You know, I've got much more than that. Do you see a certain state of mind that could give a certain security? In the same way, recognizing whatever happens in life that might dissuade you from the practice of Dharma, you might think was a big loss or big problem or something incredibly enticing that would dissuade you from practicing Dharma, you know. The big R. What is the big R? No. Relationship, you know. Everyone, this is what's our, you know, I don't think people so much, you know, some people are attracted by power, some people are attracted by pleasure of the senses, but I think this is always, any course that you give, if you want to be the program director of any Dharma center, you want something that you want to have a course that draws the most people, you just give a course on relationships. You know, there'll be tons of people that will come. Everyone wants to have good relationship, you know, loving relationship and so forth. So if you think, I've got a perfect human rebirth, this perfect human rebirth that we have is more valuable than a wish-fulfilling gem, an Aladdin's lamp. Do you know what the wish-fulfilling gem is? Do you know, Mark? Have you heard of it? Wish-granting jewel?
Just a jewel that can grant. I'm just guessing every wish.
Yeah, just say,
Hey, give me a...
Right, yeah. Give me a pineapple, I want a chocolate shake, whatever. I want the relationship, I want money, I want to be director. I don't want to be director. Yeah, I wanted to be director, now I don't. I see I don't want to be director. Whatever. Wish-granting gem is one of the possessions of the universal monarchs. It's something that one can obtain through... You got it in your bag? You have it in your bag? That one can obtain if you have the karma. And bodhisattvas often come in possession of wish-fulfilling gem. If it's cleaned in a certain way and placed in a certain position and prayers are made, one's mundane wishes are fulfilled. So you might say, well, what, you know, so the devil comes and says, Mark, you can either give me your soul, your perfect human rebirth, or, you know, if you give me your soul, I'll give you this wish-granting gem, this Aladdin's lamp, whatever you want to call it. What else do we mythologically call them? Aladdin's lamp, what else? Do we have some other name in our Western mythology? That's one of them, isn't it?
There's Golem.
Golem, like in the trilogy of...
No, well, they took that name from, there's this gypsy tale of this little creature made out of clay that is like a genie.
Okay.
Like a genie.
Leprechauns, huh?
Okay. So maybe leprechauns or something like that.
That's your wishes.
So,
Rumpelstiltskin.
Rumpelstiltskin, okay. I'm not familiar with any of those, but anyway. Say, for instance, if you were to evaluate and think, would I trade this life and what I could do with it to have this wish-fulfilling gem? You might think, wow, I could be rich, I could be famous, I could be the richest person in the world, most powerful, I could become suddenly charismatic and attractive to others and everything, whatever one could dream of. On the other hand, you could have this perfect human rebirth where you're free from all of these temptations and you have the equanimity and you're focused on the Dharma. From a Dharma point of view, this perfect human rebirth is more valuable than a wish-granting gem because with a perfect human rebirth, you can create the causes of enlightenment. With a wish-granting gem, you cannot create the causes of enlightenment. You can create money, maybe wealth, but like Lama Zopa said, how much money do you need to achieve enlightenment? You know, with this perfect human rebirth, you can purify negative karma and be assured of not being born in the lower realms. But with a wish-granting gem, Aladdin's lamp, whatever, there's no way that can protect you from the suffering of the lower realms in the next lifetime or future lifetimes. Do you want to argue with that?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
What if you knowingly took the wish, the gem, but you knew you were going to use it to create, you know, compassion and things like that, use it for good means.
Use it to create compassion, or
well, use it, not compassion.
yeah, I know what you're saying, but you got
use
to be
it for
precise.
altruistic.
This was a Geshe studies kind of thing, right?
Well, no,
You can't use it to create compassion.
no, okay, not compassion, but use it for altruistic.
Okay, so if you have an altruistic mind, of course, the same thing. When we talk about a person spending their lifetime making money, trying to become famous and so forth, to influence others, with a mind that thinks only of the happiness of this lifetime, that becomes non-virtuous. With a mind like a bodhisattva's motivation, knowing that with resources and with charisma and influence, I can benefit others positively, striving for those things, striving for wealth, position, and influence now, with that intention, becomes not only neutral, becomes virtuous, and incredibly virtuous if it's done out of compassion. So that's the same answer in that case. So it's, if you had this really pure motivation and said, wow, if I had the wish-fulfilling gem, of course that's what bodhisattvas seek, the wish-fulfilling gem sometime, but not just for mundane reasons. So the point is this: you think this life of leisure and endowment is more valuable than a wish-granting gem. It's more rare to find. It's very, very difficult to find a life of leisure and endowment. It has more value. It can protect you from suffering in the future. Wish-granting gem cannot. Through this lifetime of practicing Dharma with a life of leisure and endowment, you can create merit to make realizations. You can meditate, leave imprints in your mind to develop compassion, bodhicitta, wisdom, renunciation, so forth. That's not, you can't do with a wish-granting gem. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, so first of all, think, this life is worth more than a universe full of wish-fulfilling gems. You think of it that way. No, even if you had a universe full of wish-fulfilling gems, not just one. Not, you know, when my mind would be really greedy. Like I tell you the story of my fantasy of pleasure is to have a swimming pool filled with stracciatella, gelato. You know, not just a small cup. You know, a huge swimming pool with fences around to keep others out and so forth. So, not being satisfied with just one wish-fulfilling gem. Think, even if I had a universe full of wish-fulfilling gems, this lifetime now is more valuable. Then, when you meditate in that way, when you think in that way, then you start to see, whatever happens, your arm has to be cut off. You know, your baby leaves you. You know, you go bankrupt. Whatever. You think, it's just the same example as the person with a lot of money in the bank who's been shortchanged or lost some money, and they think, oh, it doesn't matter. I have something so much more valuable. In the same way, I have something so much more valuable than a universe of wish-fulfilling gems. This money that I've lost, this problem, is nothing compared to a universe of wish-fulfilling gems, and I have something more valuable, this life of leisure and endowment. So if one can meditate in that way, this is how, when one embellishes the meditation, the practice, not just, you know, being a scholar and saying, oh yes, I know the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments, they're blah, 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 but actually putting it into practice in your own life, in your own meditation. These are some meditation techniques, I think, that Khyentse Trijang Rinpoche passed on, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche mentions many times. If you really delve into this meditation, it's very, very rich. So recognizing the value, recognizing the perfect human rebirth, understanding its value. Thirdly, what's the third one? Third outline of it? Recognizing the difficulty, the rarity of a perfect human rebirth. So this life of leisure and endowment, it doesn't come about because Indra or God or anyone gave it to you. It comes about because of karmic conditions. The conditions to create a perfect human rebirth like this are very difficult to create. It takes a sustained practice of morality. It could be that you could create in one incident the karma, the moral karma, the ethical karma, the practice of morality to be born in the upper realms, in the human realm. Maybe taking the 24-hour precepts, or keeping precepts like that, and some extraordinary, with very, very pure motivation that might be, or accumulation of karma like that over many situations. But that doesn't create all the karma to be born as a human, and to have all the leisure and endowment. There are many other karmic causes needed to come about. Some of them have to do with the practice not only of morality, but of generosity. So to be born as a person without these endowments, just to be born as a human, but not to have faculties that are full, not to have the leisure to be able to practice. These come about through, some of the causes are generosity. Basically, the 6 perfections are the causes to have all of the conditions of a perfect human rebirth. But those conditions, whatever conditions we have, in addition, the main causes that are usually given are morality, the practice of morality, that is abstaining from negative actions and creating virtue. Generosity, so that we will have material conditions also. The third condition, besides the other of the 6 perfections, the third thing is stainless prayer. Because we have other karmic seeds in our mind stream that might ripen at other times. What we would like to do is to have them all ripen at the same time in a life of leisure and endowment, especially if we're motivated to make use of it. It would be a shame just to have a perfect human rebirth and just be distracted, by the meaningless activities of this lifetime, to get into, acquisition and pleasure of the senses and so forth and so on. So a life of leisure and endowment is very rare because of the causes are very difficult to create. It's not easy to practice morality. If one is trying to practice morality over some period of time and one falls from that, it's difficult to know how to purify, difficult to know how to restore one's vows and so forth. So it's this is something rare. It's also difficult to create sustained generosity and so forth in this age. So from the point of view of causes, difficult to find a human rebirth. One of the other ways of expressing the difficulty is through example. So one of the great examples that's mentioned in the sutras, and Nagarjuna mentions in his text, is this famous example of the turtle. Is it the turtle or the tortoise? Which one lives underwater? Turtle, right? Okay. So imagine a turtle, huge turtle, that's living at the bottom of the sea and is able to stay down there. It comes up once every 100 years, sticks its head up above the water, takes a gulp of air, goes back down to the bottom for another 100 years. 1 second in 100 years. So you're the big math guy? How many seconds in a year? We had to know, and this is one of those kind of in college sometimes they were some of the professors who could do things on their napkins, how many atoms in the universe times how many universes, they could kind of do these things on their cocktail napkin.
1 second in 100 years?
Yeah, it comes up 1 second in 100 years. So just to give you an idea, I think there's order of magnitude is something like pi times 10 to the 7th seconds in a year. Okay, so 3 times 10 to the 9th seconds in 100 years. 10 to the 9th means what? 10 to the 1st is what? 1 followed by 1 0, right? So 1 followed by 9 zeros. 3 times that seconds. Just one of those seconds, one comes up, the turtle comes up for the air, and then goes back down again. It's said that this is the similar ratio to being born in the upper realms and the lower realms. So only 1 out of maybe like 10 to the 9th, one part out of 10 to the 9th, that one would be born in the upper realms. Not even born as a human, maybe as a god, as a asura, and so forth. To be born with a perfect human rebirth where you met the Dharma is even more rare. So the example goes on to say that on the surface of the ocean is floating a golden, they say yoke, say a golden circle, ring. How a golden ring is floating, don't ask me. It's floating on the surface of the ocean, okay? So this turtle comes up, and if you can imagine the surface of the ocean, of the earth, right? Okay? The turtle comes up. Comes in the Buddhist example, so there must be something to think about here. Turtle comes up. Most of the time it comes up once every 100 years for its 1 second gulp of air. The Dharma, the ring of Dharma is somewhere else. The teachings, somewhere else. So it goes down again, maybe it comes over here and then floats by, but he didn't come up at that time. Then he comes up somewhere else. So to actually, the example of finding, the rarity of finding a life of leisure and endowment like this is the analogy to show the rarity is this. The chance of a blind tortoise, so we add the blindness so you can't see the golden ring and sort of swim over that way, Blind tortoise coming up 1 second every 100 years and blindly putting his head or her head, can turtles be both male and female? Okay. Putting his or her head through this golden ring, which is floating on the surface of the ocean. What do you think the chances are? Pretty small.
Depends on how big the ring is.
Just fits over its neck. And it's just a medium-sized turtle. Okay, so that's a very. If you think about that, this is an example that the Buddha gave in the sutras, in many sutras. So you might use that as your, that particular example. Turtle, golden ring, blind turtle, ocean, coming up 1 second every 100 years. So that gives you an idea how rare it is, what we have right now, to be born as a human like this. Now, other examples that are given is like if you take dried peas, in India, you get these lentils, dried peas. What are the chances of taking one, you're throwing them at a glass pane? What are the chances of it sticking? Of course, you might say, well, there's once in a while you might get one that's got a little sap on it or wasn't completely dried. In general, almost impossible to do something like that. So a human rebirth like this is very, very rare. We have encountered, like Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charavatara, like on a dark night where you can't see, like being in the darkness of ignorance, the lower realms or whatever, for a moment, a stroke of lightning comes and illuminates everything, but just for the shortest instant. That's what we're like right now. We have this instant right now over a continuity of many, many lifetimes of darkness, mental darkness and suffering. And for an instant, we have some acuity, some clarity of mind, and we can see things as they are. So, as Shantideva says, having this boat of a perfect human rebirth, life of leisure and endowment, that's very difficult to find again. When a situation like this, don't be a fool in sleep. Excuse me, I didn't mean to. I noticed you nodding off, but don't be foolish in sleep. So this is an edict that's given sometimes to the lamas. So sometimes some of the lamas take it very literally, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche for decades, taking the aspect of not sleeping at night, only in meditative equipoise, getting the needed kind of serenity of mind that our deep sleep usually provides. So when one recognizes the perfect human rebirth, what it is, what we've got, it's like the beggar recognizing he's got this jewel and what one can do with it that is more valuable than a universe full of wish-fulfilling gems. And that it is something that's very rare. It's not something you get all the time. Then this is the idea of exhorting one. Look at what you've got. It's like the example I told you many times, this TV show I used to watch when I was a little kid. I think my mother liked to watch it. You remember this one with the, I'm not sure if it was Queen for a Day or, might have been, but this particular, I didn't tell the whole thing. There was a program called Queen for a Day, but this particular program, there was something you got to be in the finals by doing something. And the final thing was that they opened up the curtain and there was this big area where there were all sorts of gifts you can choose. And you'd have a certain amount of time depending on your score. You might have 30 seconds or 12 seconds or a minute. And you had a big cart and you could go around and just pick what you wanted. And the audience was watching this. You remember? The Price is Right. Was that it? Okay, great. I'm going to look this up on the web. So here's George. I've got the time. I'm going around in the audience, and here I am. I'm taking all of the gelato ice cream and putting in my cart, and the audience is going crazy. They're saying, "There's a Pontiac in the back. There's a stereo, the television. What are you, stupid? You're not taking the essence of this time. You've got a limited amount of time." That's probably how the Buddhas are looking at us. They're looking at us, trying to get pleasure, trying to get, to hear sweet ego-pleasing words and sounds, to have pleasure of the senses, sensual pleasure, to have some kind of reputation in the world, to have some kind of security, when we could be getting, the real substantial benefits of this perfect human rebirth. So a person who has recognized this is someone who is energized not to be distracted by the meaningless activities of this life. Even this meditation alone, all by itself, not talking about death and impermanence and other things, can motivate one to take to not be distracted by ordinary non-dharmic things. One of the examples that's given by one of the old Tibetan lamas, Potawa, I think, or one of the others, Chengawa, was the story of this lame person, old man who was just sitting on a cliff for a long time, couldn't do anything, and he saw a wild ass coming by. Was ass is different than donkey? Different? Same thing? Yeah. Ask him. So this was a wild donkey running by, and he jumped off the cliff onto the back of the donkey and was running and singing and looked so happy, and people said, "What are you doing? Get off of that thing!" And he said, "How often am I ever going to have a lame man like this? How often am I ever going to have the chance of riding on a donkey?" So to us, this is like one of the jokes that Geshe Tekchok used to tell. Doesn't resonate with us the same way it would with Tibetans. But it's just like, how often are you going to be able to have a situation? Well, the example that I think maybe resonate with you, I've told it before. Imagine you've got a Xerox machine that's been given to the center, 24-hour trial. What did it usually do? I remember this at Manjushri Institute. All night long, people were down there Xeroxing books because it was going to cost at some other time, and they got this thing, a trial for 24 hours. So you'd be stupid, you're dumb, let's take a break, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're stupid. This situation is never going to come again. Or maybe plates to print $100 bills, You only have them overnight. You got to give them back to the mafia the next day, All night long, even you get sleepy, you say, "Oh, it doesn't matter. This. How often do I get plates for $100 bills, to run off, So like that, this perfect human rebirth is so rare, and what you can do with it is so beneficial that a person that recognizes this and analyzes it in depth is energized to take advantage of it all the time, day and night, like that. So this is a little bit of introduction to that first part, and I'm just going to mention a little bit of the next chapter, and that will connect us with the chapter subsequent to that about death and impermanence. So the second part of this, this meditation was sort of exhorting the disciples to take advantage of the life of leisure and endowment, leisure and opportunity. Now, chapter 8 says, outline 2, how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So this includes all the rest of the meditations on the path. So first of all, it says how to develop certain knowledge of a general presentation of the path. So that has sub-outlines, how all the scriptures are included within the paths of the 3 types of persons that I was mentioning before, and why students are led in stages using the trainings of the 3 types of persons. So what are these 3 types of persons? Good, bad, and medium, or what is it? The good, the bad, and the ugly. The Jewish have always some good names for these. I remember my friend in New York. What's a mensch? What is a mensch? Mensch? Like a really exceptional person. If someone says you're a mensch, that's really good. Right? You're a real gentleman. It just means gentleman? Okay. It's kind of like man, right? Mensch. You're a man. You're a real gentleman. So that's not what's meant here. The 3 types of persons are the individuals that are actually practicing, in some degree, spiritual path. The lowest kind of practice of an individual like this is a person who recognizes their inevitable mortality and is working for happiness in the future lifetimes by abstaining from negative karma, trying to create some virtue. This, I think, this particular kind of practice is what we find in most religions, say in Christianity and Islam and so forth. People with anticipation of happiness of heaven and the fear of hell, the admonition of God who's going to judge this, they abstain from negative actions as much as they can, and they try to please God or Jesus or whatever by doing virtuous deeds. Same kind of thing in the Buddhist tradition. Individual who understands karma and recognizes impermanence, that person may strive to curb their emotion, their negative emotions, their anger, their attachment, their pride, their jealousy, and so forth, recognizing that these are causes of rebirths in the lower realms, especially the negative actions that are consequent of these, the 10 paths of negative actions, right? Killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and so forth. But the person, that initial kind of person, does so with anticipation of the future, happiness of future lives. The person of intermediate scope is one who has a broader perspective and recognizes that even if they're born in the next lifetime in the upper realms as a human in good conditions and so forth, that life will also finish. And unless they create karma in that lifetime, again they'll fall in the lower realm. So they'd have to create karma to be born as a human again and again and again. An endless kind of thing. No assurance that in any one lifetime negative karma might start to ripen that you've created in the past and that you would fall and lose all that impetus. So that person of intermediate scope begins to seek for an escape from cyclic existence and encounters the Buddha's teachings on how to escape from cyclic existence. How do you do that? The bus? That particular plane flight? Which one? Shambhala? Get the guidebook? No. That's not how you get out of cyclic existence. You get out of cyclic existence by what? By practicing the 3 higher trainings. First, morality, to ensure a quiet mind and a continuity of human rebirths. On the basis of that, developing concentration, quiet mind, so your behavior is more restrained. And then, on the basis of that concentration and morality, developing wisdom that realizes selflessness, emptiness of the person and of phenomena, to actually cut the roots of cyclic existence, all based on renunciation. Looking at cyclic existence, even birth in the human realm or the God realm, having so many shortcomings, no real pleasure to be found. All like walking around with a load of thorns all the time, or nothing to be found that's real pleasure within cyclic existence, yet knowing that there is something beyond that can be attained, nirvana. That's the person of intermediate scope. The person of great scope investigates, perhaps because of familiarizing with these other scopes, other kinds of motivations in previous lifetimes, begins to investigate through hearing the Buddha's teachings about our similarity with others, our indebtedness to other living beings, that it would be very selfish to achieve that state of nirvana for oneself, and takes the commitment, starts to investigate and take the commitment to achieve enlightenment, not just nirvana, in order to benefit all sentient beings. So we've talked about that in many different contexts, but that's what's being meant here by the 3 types of persons. So let's just finish there for today, and on Thursday we'll continue a little bit about that. We'll continue on that, and then mainly talk about the next meditation on death and impermanence, which is, now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty. Once you've recognized the perfect human rebirth, you're motivated to take advantage. Now here's a method to actually help you to do that. Meditation on death and impermanence, how that helps. So let's try to finish up with a little dedication. Sit comfortably. That's right. Take a deep breath. Try to, if you can, duplicate the quiet state of mind on the clear light nature of the mind as you get familiar with that. Then think, tonight I've created virtuous karma that will definitely ripen within cyclic existence as something pleasurable. Let me dedicate it in such a way that it doesn't become simply an obstacle in my future, encountering pleasure or fame or charisma or beauty, being powerful. But in whatever way that it ripens, may it become a cooperative cause of my continued Dharma practice to develop the two bodhicittas, conventional bodhicitta, the altruistic mind of enlightenment, and what we call ultimate bodhicitta, the mind held by conventional bodhicitta, but realizing emptiness, motivated out of compassion for others. And as always, seal the meditation, if you can, in the emptiness of the three spheres. The merits themselves don't exist the way they appear. They're merely designated by mind. The goals dedicated to and the act of dedication also are not truly existent, but still function, appear and function.